Facial setups in general are very complicated to explain in one or two tutorials. We're going to create a facial setup for the bodybuilder model that's sitting on the CD. First we need to set the project directory. Instead of going to the bodybuilder directory, look for a directory called Face Setup under Rigging 2. Double click on that, click OK. We'll go to File, and we're going to load from the Scenes folder a scene called Nate_Setup G. This is the state we left him on the last tutorial. Switch to a left view. We're going to create a bone setup for the face instead of using morph targets. So the first thing we need to do is bring in the rest of the parts for our bodybuilder. Let's do a little scene organization first. Let's create a null called Nate_root. So add that to the scene. We'll create a new null called Nate_effects. Add that to the scene, and then Nate_geometry. Let's add that. Parent both of those to root. Let's red lock all of these. When we hold down the control key, you can lock the item and its children. We'll change all of them to N so we don't really see them. These are just organizational nulls. So we'll drag the effects to the effects null, close that one down, drag the geometry to the geometry null, and drag the hips to the root. So now when we shut everything down, we should be able to see only our Nate_root null. So let's parent everything to that root. Makes for a nice clean system, and if you have multiple characters, it's easy to close down the list so you can see only the character you're working on. Let's open that back up again. And let's go to File. We're going to load. Let's go out of the Scenes folder into the Objects folder and load eye left, eye right, lower teeth, and upper teeth. So we'll just open those. Shift select those, and we'll parent that to the Nate_geometry. Now we have something to work off of here. We can go into Perspective View, and we'll just move around, and you can see that I've given him a very nice set of choppers. And we need to find ways to attach these teeth and these pieces of other mesh, like the eyeballs, to the mesh without having to parent these physically to parts of the bones. In other words, we want to keep everything in the geometry folder, but make it move as if it were actually parented or under influence of the skeleton. So the first thing we need to do is go into the geometry null, and we're going to hide the bodybuilder mesh. So all we're left with are the teeth and the eyeballs. We'll change the teeth, everything to wireframe or E, and we'll start setting pivot points. I'm going to set pivot points on the eyeball, so just highlight eye right. And we'll go into Setup tab for this. There's extra options in the rest block called Pivot. If you click on the Pivot button, you'll be able to move the object's pivot without disturbing its model space position. So it stays in the same spot, but it's going to rotate around your pivot instead. We'll position that right in the middle of the eyeball. Go to the front view and look for the object that has the bounding box square around it to find out which one to move the pivot to. We'll just position that right in the middle of the right eye. Do the same thing for the left eye. Just highlight eye left, click on the pivot button to activate pivot. Zoom out here. You can even target the pivot, grab the pivot and move it, and everything else will roll along with you. We'll zoom in, and we'll position this right on top, in the middle. Go to a left view of the eyeball. Put it right in the middle of the eyeball. To turn off pivot, just click into anything else. So we'll change the eye right and eye left to there. So now when we go into Animate, and we want to rotate this around heading, it rotates around our pivot instead. Let's reset that keyframe. Now let's go into our skeleton and create attach points for these eyeballs. First thing we need to do is make a null for the entire head. Let's turn off targeting here. I'm going to Setup. We're going to create a null called Nate underscore face controls. Let's use the plus key on that one. Let's drag this out of the hierarchy. Just drag that right to Nate root. We'll create another one called Nate underscore face attach. We'll add that one. This one we will parent to the head bone. See it show up right at the origin of the head bone. Let's pitch this down 90 degrees so that it's facing level in the world view and Z is facing straight forward. Let's highlight our face controls null and let's move this one in setup mode till it sits right on top of our face attach. Face controls, as you've guessed, will hold all of the controls, all of our eyebrows and lips and noses and everything. Our face attach is simply meant to be an attach point for our face, so we don't have to dig down into the hierarchy to see our face controls go active. Now while we have face attach going here, let's create another null. We'll call this one Nate underscore attach IR for right. Plus key to add that. We'll parent that to face attach. You'll see that it's showing up as Z facing forward. And we'll move this over to the pivot points. Go to the front view. Since this is the right side, just shift it to the left. And it should be sitting right on top of the eyeball. Switch to perspective and see if it's on the right side. If it's not, remove the negative sign from the X and hit enter, and it should be on the right eyeball. Now just mirror that one across right now by tapping the divide key on the keypad and name this one IL for left side. This all seems fairly complicated now, but give it a second and I'll show you what goes on here. Let's create some commands. We have our expressions list open here. Let's just create a new expression, a new variable. Call this one Nate underscore face. Underneath that, create a new variable, Nate underscore attach eyes. Just parent that to the face for organizational purposes. When we have attach eyes open, go to the expressions block. We're going to look for an expression called move to. Let's go down. It's in alphabetical order. Highlight move to, and it'll just start. Middle mouse click on the mesh first, which in this case is eye left. So we'll put eye left in the first argument, which will move itself to our attach IL, which is the second argument. 1 to turn it on, and we'll right mouse click, and you'll watch the pixels slightly move. It means it's translating to. Go to the end of this expression, tap the plus key, and from the pull down menu here we'll just highlight eye right and eye attach right and do the same thing. So we go into animate and highlight face attach, we'll pitch it up and down. The eyes stay stuck to our face attach. We'll go to a left view. If we grab the neck and pitch it back and forth, the eyes stay attached to the head that way. Let's reset that keyframe. Let's go back into the Commands tab and let's attach our face controls. Let's go back to the variables. We'll create a new variable. Call this one Nate underscore attach face. Go to the expressions. We still have our move to. So middle mouse click and highlight our face controls null, which will attach itself to our face attach null. 1 to turn it on, right mouse click and add that. Let's just go over, tap the plus key again, and we'll add that expression again. Why do we add 2 move tos? I'll show you. Move to and its sibling align follow the same syntax. Type in capital A L I G N. Hit enter. Set both of these to operate after keyframing so they stay stuck to the neck. So we should see things moving to this object when we start animating. This is the basic framework for parts of geometry on the head. Go into Animate and reset that keyframe, and we'll take it slow. We'll save this scene. So we'll save this Messiah scene as Nate Setup H.